work outside of the home in terms of like collaboration and working together. So I had to devote some class time to it, and so that was kind of I had to budget for time and make sure that there was enough time for me to explain what they were doing. Um, but see, the children's or the students' exposure to a lot of technologies like Excel and PowerPoint. That's why I didn't go with PowerPoint. With Excel, I had to teach them how to make cells and summarize data and lots of things. So it's like almost a lot of the time was spent just teaching them how to use technology. So that was a challenge. And also like organizing and interpreting from multiple sources. I had to teach them so much about what is a credible source of information and what is not a credible source of information. Like Yahoo Answers you should probably not use to get, your information from. And so um, it was difficult, teaching them and time consuming. Um, and then finally one last challenge. It's like it's so difficult when you're doing like an inquiry based classroom. You want to um, it's tough to give up control of a class when you're so used to, not that obviously, I have I'm knowledgeable about, student-centered classrooms, but it's tough to take kind of a back seat and change your role to someone who is like a guide and someone who navigates and, supports the students and let them take control. You just have to do a lot of planning beforehand, and it's a little bit scary at first, but it definitely takes dividends because they take ownership of it and they want to learn and they want to start the project as soon as they enter the classroom. But it is like one of the scariest things in the world at the beginning of the project. It's like, what have I gotten myself into? So that was a huge challenge for me psychologically. Um, and then, sorry, next slide, please. So let's see, last slide. Okay, and so what I learned a ton. First off, I know I want to do more of these projects in the future. I definitely want to do projects where it incorporates multiple units. I also want to start kind of some cross-curricular, or not cross-curricular, but multi-subject, collaborate with other teachers. I feel like science, I could do a ton of planning with the math teacher, and we could do like a multi-subject project. With graphing, I could totally incorporate the English teacher in terms of if they have to write up a lab report. So I really want to get into more multi-subject projects. I realize that when students are enjoying themselves, learning just comes naturally, and they don't even think that they're in school. They're just so excited about what they're learning. So it's something that I'm like, you tell yourself like obviously you want every lesson to be as engaging as possible, but it's definitely that relevancy angle. It's bringing in something from the real world and letting them practice actual skills. And so that was one of my big takeaways for doing projects in the future. Also, another big thing that I learned is that students, they'll rise to the challenge that you think is beyond them. And I mean, I have to admit, when I saw my kids when they first came to this classroom and I looked at their 8th grade test scores, a lot of them were behind. I mean, they had ones and twos, and for test scores, like they need to be at a 3, which is grade level. So these are kids that are multiple grade levels behind. And, when I saw that, I was like, well, how am I going to be able to do anything that's challenging with them? And what I found is that, they were capable of so much more than their test scores suggested, that they just completely rose to the challenge because they were so interested in it. And, it just shows that their capability is not just what a number suggests, it's more than that. And next point is hook children with relevancy or task, I kind of mentioned that. And then also, planning early definitely paid off. Making sure, like I plan the unit basically for the year, and I make sure I budget enough time for each unit, so it didn't stress me out too much that I had this 2-week project at the end of the cycle. I knew that if I put it in there, I'd have enough time for the other units throughout the year. So definitely planning early paid off, and also in terms of a resources standpoint, like if you're going to do something as ambitious as this, you want to make sure that, okay, well, it's 2 days before you're about to do this test. Well, do you have all the equipment? No, I made sure, like, before I embarked on it, I had everything that I needed. I knew how to use it, and I knew how to explain it. Um, and then also in the future, I think I'd like to do maybe like a wiki um, page where students can, like, post things online and showcase it to other students in like other classrooms. I don't know if that's too like unrealistic, but I think it'd be totally cool. But anyway, um, that was about it. The students, they had a blast, but they also learned. They learned better than any other traditional lessons that I've done. They have the scientific method and genetics down pat better than other units in other years. So I'm definitely going to continue to do these multi-unit realistic projects for every single cycle. So that's about it. So next slide is if you have any questions. Totally open to anything you want to ask me about, not just this project, but you know
Hey, Andrew,
starting
this is Jim.
teaching.
Can you hear me?
Yep, definitely hear it.
Great. Hey, terrific presentation. Thank you very much. Very,
Problem.
very informative and concise. And your students obviously have a good role model for that. A couple of questions. And
Mm-hmm.
Dr. O'Connor, no laughing at this first question, but Andrew, did you use any MindMeister in your approach to this, or did you ask the students to sort of map out their thinking on this via a
Concept map
MindMeister
type thing.
type of resources?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great idea. No, I didn't. I totally love MindMeister. Actually, Mrs. O'Connor actually introduced me to it as well, and I just kind of went, you know, just went wild on kind of concept mapping. It is definitely, I mean, I love doing concept maps with my students. I, built them up throughout the entire year. I do it with all my units. It's great. It helps organize information. They really enjoy it. They've gotten to a point where they can kind of do it on their own.
Hmm.
But in terms of like them just kind of, it's something that I think definitely could be incorporated into a unit. I just think that you need to like start early and simple and just kind of like build with them, like, okay, well, this unit we're only going to do a little bit, and then the next unit, because it almost becomes like a way for them to organize resources, like, links to websites, pictures, not just a way to represent their learning. But I think that, I mean, I should have put that in there because it's a great tool.
Yeah, it seems like it could be, as long as they don't end up, pouring the kitchen sink into it, kind of like you were saying on their
Yeah.
PowerPoint slides. There's the danger of trying to put everything on one slide or even on several. Um,
Yeah.
Another one, if I may. It seems like
Mhm.
on a project like this, um, you might feel like they end up being sort of a mile wide and an inch deep in terms of
Hmm.
their understanding. But you
Correct.
made sure that they had um, the fundamentals for the theories that they need and the techniques and so forth for the theories that they would need to employ during the project. And could you just name maybe two or three of those content-rich components that they had to bring to the table in order to do this project? Things that you had to cover earlier in the year in order to
Okay,
guarantee
so
that
I had to. I
they at
mean,
least had a chance.
I had to really cover um, the scientific method, like specifically, how to set up an experiment. And as far as this was concerned, they really needed to be able to know how to use a microscope. So they needed to be able to, know the difference between the coarse and fine adjustment. So that was more of like a skill-based ability that they needed to understand, but definitely, I mean, something that is relevant to science and something they need to be taught. How to create a wet mount, which is basically making a slide. Sterile technique. Why is it important to, have organized data and not contaminate the evidence? The more like conceptual things and the more content and not skill things were more in terms of the genetics, like, and they needed to know, DNA. It's a long strand, and and this had to do with that thing I was mentioning, the gel electrophoresis machine. they need to know how it's cut by what's called a restriction enzyme. So I had to like kind of, teach them those things, but at the same time, they had done those at the beginning of the year, and I wasn't like introducing all these things fresh. So they had, a degree of mastery, but this really reinforced it. So I didn't want to like, introduce too many new learning topics during the project. Um, and hold on, I just want to, I see so many things in the chat bar, and I'm like totally not like a Second Life guru or anything, and I want
Do
to.
you want me to read them to you? We have.
Totally, I would like, yeah.
Okay.
I see them, and I.
And I'll read them to you, and we may not be able to get to everything. Andrew, could they email you later with other questions?
Yeah, they could email me anything, and I'll answer it. Yeah, any question you have. I did see one quick question, like that last question was something about the purchase of gel electrophoresis.
And there was another question too about I'll read it to you. When you gave up control, were you able to direct the class enough to handle the core curriculum? And does your pacing get better over time, as well as the question on electrophoresis?
So, as far as the giving up control and redirecting their attention, in this particular project, their engagement was so high that it's like, they're so busy doing their own work, and there's enough work to be done that there's not off-task behavior. There's not, I don't really, I can like facilitate, I can just go to multiple groups as they're doing their work and check in with them. And that's what I love teaching, just give them a little information and they go with it and they learn on their own. So in terms of that, I really didn't need to redirect focus. There have been times though that I have tried to give up control, and then I realized, they were lost or they were off task. And it's usually due to one, either my lesson was not engaging enough, or two, they don't know what to do. So there are times though that I like, quote unquote give up control, and it's awful. And I'm like, but my lesson is done, and I put my, hand on my forehead. I'm like, what did I just do to them? So that definitely happens. But in this one, it didn't, because the engagement was so high. And then as far as the pacing is concerned, my pacing when I first started was not good, to put it mildly. But I've seen so many Regents tests, and I've gotten to a point where, I can do a lesson or do a topic, and I know kind of the better ways to approach it, that I know how long it will take them to master certain topics. So yes, my pacing now at my 5th year, I would describe as good. Not very good. But it's to a point where, I'm very comfortable with it. But yeah, my pacing at first was not good. And then the gel electrophoresis question. It was very, very simple to get the equipment. And let me preface this by saying that, like, my principal, he's one of those guys I can be like, I need this. Can you buy it? And he's like, sure. Which does not happen often. I'm very, very lucky. But that being said, it's very, very cheap. It's probably, $1,000. And if you sent me your email, I could totally hook you up with the links that I use and the equipment that I use. And they come with this pre-prepared DNA samples that you can just pop in, and you don't have to worry about collecting samples or anything. So it's actually very, very simple to set up. And the aggregates, they come with these pre-mixing buffers and all these things. It's very, very simple. Did you tell your students you had this plan at the end of the year? I had it planned. At the beginning of the year, I told them about this project, but I really started planning it during the middle, like October-ish and early November, and I really only decided basically, 2 weeks or a week before that I was going to start doing this. Because I knew that I had enough time, I could fit it in, and it wouldn't disrupt my pacing at all, but it would also reinforce some of the units and concepts they had gone over the first cycle. One mistake that I definitely made, that I, just as a little bit of advice, that I had no problem, getting along with students. I didn't, it was almost to the point where I could, it was almost that friend approach. And that's where I made my error. Like, I could totally get along with them, but then when I need to put my foot down, it was really, really difficult, and then they ran right over me like I was nothing. And I came in mid-year, took over for some teacher who couldn't take it anymore. So this class was awful. Like, it was a very difficult experience. So I think just the lesson to learn from that is, like, don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. Like, you know, when you need to be, in control, go ahead and stand up for yourself. And once I did that, my life was so much easier. You have to, like, totally manage that. It's like such a dynamic flow between giving up control and being in front of a class, and giving up control. But at this, you are the boss. You are the one that's, yeah, exactly. You're the one that, you say what you say goes. So, once I figured that out, my life was so much easier. And you guys will be great. Like, first few years, it's kind of tough, but, like, you just learn, and, like, I learn, and everyone learns. It's like it's a great job because you're continually, challenging yourself and learning something new. And I reflect on all my lessons every day. And, like, the other day, I just gave a really crappy lesson and I hated it. But you think, you're like, well, how could I have done that differently? What was bad about it? And then, the next time I do it, I know I'm going to do it differently. So that's all I had to say. And honestly, thank you guys so much for, saying thanks. And I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate, getting the chance to talk to you guys.